All right, well, this is our first of our major lectures for this course. And with any course that I have, I like to introduce history. I think we need some perspective and understanding about where things fit in, where they operate. So history is important. We're going to have history throughout this entire semester. We talk about where genetics came from, talk about the discovery of DNA and how we even know it was DNA. We'll talk continually about history. But right now, I just want to talk about the kind of the general background of where did genetics come from. That's the part of this lecture. And obviously, with any sciences, science is sort of this method we use to try to understand the world around us. And that understanding comes from our observations as humans. So we're making these observations. It's absolutely true in genetics. We are interested in looking out there and seeing that there's variation, there's differences, trying to understand where that variation comes from, trying to understand how it gets moved from one generation to the next, asking questions about that, ultimately forming theories about how that occurred. So human observation is critically important. Now, once you have humans involved, of course, then you tend to have societal groups forming and societal systems, and the societal systems support science, support this idea of allowing people the time to make observations and the time to think about those observations. So science itself, genetics, contributes to society very much. We talk how we do things, many of the things that we do in medicine and all the other areas that we have are really have this genetics background that contributes. And in reverse, society often determines how we do our science, right? Society funds the opportunity to do science, and therefore it often tells us what we can do and what we can't do, which areas are important for the particular time and which areas might be important later on. So society gives us the resources and the time to do that. In return, we pay back society with the learnings from science, okay? So they're interconnected. Right? But now, where in the world did genetics come from? Okay, if we think about human systems, most recent data that I've seen pushes Homo sapiens, our species, back almost 300,000 years. That sounds like a long time. It's not. Work on mice that are 2 million years old as far as it being a species. But pushing us back 300,000 is quite a push because we thought that humans were about 100,000 years old, and they pushed back to about 150,000. But most recently, Homo sapiens, at least our species, some fossil evidence suggests that we may be back even further. So, and even at that time, there was some tool use and fire use and other things that came along fairly quickly. Now, we have those things. We're sitting there, and we're doing the things that we did. We're hunter-gatherers. We're hunting. We're gathering things. We're bringing it back. And we're observing that there are things going on, right? So what really is at the root of genetics is these observations. And what were these observations about? Well, these observations were about domestication for the most part. Right? We were trying to find things that we could utilize, the animals and plants, bringing them in, habituating them to be around humans if they were animals, or developing ways that we could cultivate them ourselves or at least partially cultivate or store or something, other things. So we were domesticating things. So domestication is really where we sat around and we saw these variation in traits and phenotypes that we started asking questions about. So really, at the base of genetics is domestication, and that continues today, right? We're still, in our agricultural systems and things, are still modifying the genomes of plants and animals, trying to make them produce more product, produce different products, be resistant to disease, whatever we're trying to do. We're still in terms of domesticating systems, all right? Well, where did domestication occur? Well, it occurs in many, many places throughout the world. One of the hot spots was this area known as Mesopotamia, or the Fertile Crescent. It's an area that involves the Tigris and Euphrates River and circles around, found in the Middle East. Now, we know that lots of development there because we can go back and see drawings. We can see other writings and things that tell us clearly that there were domesticated animals there. There were systems of planting and doing things that produced these domesticated systems. Right? So domestication goes back thousands of years, many thousands of years, where we have tried to utilize plants and animals for our own purposes. Now, this Mesopotamia area, Middle East, we see things like gazelles because it reaches into Africa. Gazelles were widespread. And so we were using things that we could generate pelts from, meat from, milk from, other products that we had. Some of the early things that were domesticated were sheep and goats. Sheep and goats were used for their wool and for meats and all sorts of things. There were multiple foci for these, also for things like geese, lots of other different organisms. One of my favorites, of course, I love dogs. Dogs have been habituated with humans and domesticated for many thousands of years, at least 10,000 years. There's evidence even in North America of there being dog remains with human dwellings and human occupation areas, at least, that go back 10,000 or more years. So we've probably domesticated dogs a long, long time, and they become acutely aware to us. They can recognize our facial expressions and other things. Okay? Some people say we've domesticated cats. Having 2 cats and myself, I've never seen them domesticated. They just simply rule the world, but we'll claim that they're domesticated anyway, but certainly not like dogs. Okay? Now, if we think about it, other things that were early domesticated, again, were things like camels, lots of different types of fowl, horses, things like that we could utilize for various purposes were domesticated. And it wasn't always in this area. It was a very important area to us. One of the cool things about the Fertile Crescent, if you get to study a little bit of history, because of you have mountains above it going up into Afghanistan, and those areas are very mountainous. And of course, you go very far south below this area, you start to hit the Sierra, the Sahara Desert. So you end up with these massive desert systems that were hard to cross. And you also these mountain systems that were hard for people to cross. People did, but it was, it wasn't just like there were massive trade routes early on. So most of the technology and most of the information went east to west, generally east to west. So it went across the Mediterranean and back. And so this was sort of a spread this way, as with much less spread of technology and some of the advances to north and south. Now, as I said, not everything occurred here. Reindeer are still highly domesticated. They're not domesticated in the sense of dogs or something where you follow around, but at least the herds are habituated to humans. They can be herded in many areas. They can be used for lots of things, producing milk, pelts, and other things around the world. And again, in China and Asia, there were fowl and other things that were domesticated very early on. In different parts of the world, we saw different things. Okay, but if we think about it, what came first? I mean, was the first thing we brought in a dog or try to do a camel and keep it around our hut or cave? No, I think pretty obviously the things that go back the furthest are plants, and it makes sense, right? We were hunter-gatherers. We were going down. We were gathering seeds when they were available by the river or whatever, bringing them up to where we were staying. Some got scattered around, and you can just imagine that every now and then they sort of grew right close by, and people went, oh, well, I don't have to walk all the way to 5 kilometers to the river. I can grow them. And so we learned to domesticate plants, and there's very good evidence of that. Clearly, things like cereal grains were potentially the first things that were domesticated. We know that because there are these Neolithic granaries in other areas later, that silos and things where clearly were sitting there for storage of grain. So humans for a long, long time have been collecting grains, cultivating grains, and then storing them and using them at later times. Okay? Other thing may surprise you that's very old are date palms. The dates, I think, some of the oases in the Saharan Desert have 400 different varietals of dates. They've been domesticated and been used for production for a long, long time. And we have lots of proof of that. We have these from Western Europe, Mesopotamia. We have these figures of these deity-like structures, and clearly what they're doing by squirting like this is pollinating. We have these processionals, these procedures. You've seen these things where people have these really tall, weird umbrellas every now and then on National Geographic with fringe. Well, they're walking through the date palm groves, and what they're doing is sort of pollinating. Some Christian religions and things, Palm Sunday things are really offshoots of those times when we were mechanically fertilizing, transferring pollen from one date palm to the other by these processionals. Okay. Now, we think about that, and you have domestication going on. You now have a bit more food that's on a more regular basis. You know where to get it. You don't have to spend all of your time chasing around trying to collect it. So now we have time to do things. We have time to think. Societies start to build up. We become less nomadic and be able to build communities. People are able to sit and think a little bit more and work on things. So we start to see things like more permanent building structures come into play. But we start to see things like irrigation, very commonly in the Nile Valley. Irrigation was there's clear evidence of irrigation that was there, used for channeling water, bringing water to produce food and all sorts of things. In our part of the world, in Central and South America, the Amazon was apparently canals and systems dug through the Amazon at one time to bring water and move things around and change it. Certainly, this is the Palenque ruins that are found in southern Mexico. If you go to the Palenque ruins, it was well known for its irrigation systems, the channeling of these big rivers, a stream that ran through the middle of it. In fact, that stream, as you can see here, actually goes under some of the great pyramids that are there, and under these still beautifully constructed aquifers that are still there today. Just on happenstance, it's also the home of the Palenque mosquito fish. It's a small live-bearing fish that's only found in this short little stretch across there. So if you ever go, be sure to go over and look in the stream, and you'll see the only remaining place of the Palenque mosquito fish. Okay. All right. So we have domestication. What did it lead to? Well, it's still going on, right? And you think about what happened. We started, in this case, with corn, some progenitor of corn. Now we have all these products. You drive through Iowa, or anything place else when it's a growing season, and you see all these different stocks and types of corn. Everybody's real proud of the type they have in their field and put those out. We're still working to domesticate, to change and genetically modify those. Cattle, classic example, many parts of the world, cattle are greatly important and have been domesticated for a long, long time as a major provider. And all of these provide wealth into the systems in many ways, right? Our corn-based agricultural system of this country, the cattle-based system of many parts of Africa and other places where cattle are really the commodity. If you go into Namibia and Angola and places into the areas, you'll find the Himba people and others whose wealth is based on how many cattle they have. Cattle are used for dowries in various parts of Africa and other places, and so they're part of our wealth system. And so it's very important how we maintain and domesticate all those, as well as for everyday varietals of wheat, food, whatever, bananas, whatever we made have been domesticated. All right, so point of all this part is domestication is a root of genetics, right? We start by seeing these variations. Oh, that's better. I see this goat, and I have them here in my pen. This one doesn't have any horns. It doesn't tear up my fence or my paddock as much. I want more of those. How do I get more of those? How do I breed into those? So that became the stock of how we thought about this, and domestication moved from that to highly modified systems. Right? All right, so we've got domestication. Now, in the next lecture, we're going to talk about, okay, now that we have this time to think, what did we come up with? What theories and what ideas did we bring forward?